Guys, this is Novelis, and because I'm gonna be playing Kingdom Come Deliverance in the upcoming videos, I decided to watch a few educational videos about the medieval area since I know that that's the time period that the game takes place. For this video, it's called Feudal Systems Explain 8 Levels of Medieval Society. So let's see the sort of ranks that people had back then.
Serfs.
First one
Before
is serfs. Let's see.
sunrise, the serfs were already at work, ploughing, sowing, repairing fences that weren't theirs. They were bound to the land, unable to leave, marry, or sell property without
So they were basically like slaves, I guess.
their lord's consent. In return for protection and a hut to sleep in, they owed days of unpaid labour and heavy taxes. A serf's world stretched no farther
Definitely
than the manor
slaves.
fields. Each week they toiled on the lord's domain, and only then could they tend to their own crops to survive. They weren't slaves, but they weren't free either, chained to the same soil for generations. Still,
What a terrible way to live. I'm glad that we don't have that sort of system anymore. I hope.
life wasn't entirely bleak. Faith, festivals, and family gave small moments of colour in a hard life. The serfs were the base of the pyramid, the hands that fed everyone above them. Without their labour, the entire medieval system would have collapsed. The free peasants looked much like the serfs, same tools, same calloused hands, but one thing set them apart: freedom. They could move, bargain, or leave a lord's land altogether.
Well, then I wonder how somebody became a serf and how somebody just became a peasant. Because if the only difference is freedom, then what was how do you say? What was that thing that set them apart? Like how could a serf become a peasant is what I mean.
Instead of giving labour, they paid rent, sometimes in coin, sometimes in crops or livestock. This freedom gave them choice, and choice meant opportunity. Some became prosperous yeomen, owning their own farms and even hiring others to work for them. They lived simply, but with dignity. No master could force their hand. In a world still changed,
They lived by hard work. And that's something, you know. At least they could build up from where they were.
to feudal custom, free peasants were the quiet sign of change. They marked the shift from service and obligation towards a money economy. The low clergy, the monks, parish priests and nuns, lived among the people, poor in wealth but rich in authority. They baptized children, heard confessions, blessed marriages, and buried the dead. Monks copied books by candlelight, brewed ale, and tended gardens inside monastery walls. They preserved the knowledge that kings and nobles couldn't read, and their words shaped how entire communities saw sin, salvation, and justice.
Well, I think that I read that back then the churches had a lot of power. So I'm wondering if that's how it was in the medieval area that this person is talking about, because I know that that went from the year 500 to 1500.
Most lived humble, devoted lives, though the church's power could breed corruption too. But even when they were flawed, the clergy held immense sway. In a time when heaven felt closer and hell more real, the priests were
About the sway, I did read how churches would sell like forgiveness pieces of paper that would forgive somebody. Like, you know, just
matters as much as a noble sword. Beyond the castles and fields rose a new kind of power, the burghers. Merchants, craftsmen, and guildmasters built their fortunes not from land but from trade. In bustling cities like Bruges, Florence, and Lubeck, workshops rang with the sound of hammers and market bells. Guilds controlled prices, quality, and apprenticeships, turning skills into stability. A clever merchant could earn more than a knight, and money, not birth, decided rank. The rise of the burghers changed Europe forever. They challenged nobles with coin instead of swords, financing kings and armies. Trade routes replaced feudal roads. Gold replaced grain as the measure of power. They weren't warriors or lords, but in time, their ledgers reshaped the world more than any battle ever could. The knights, clad in steel, mounted on horseback. The knight was the armoured face of medieval power. They trained from childhood, learning to fight, ride, and live by the code of chivalry. Though
they change from childhood, then I wonder if parents sold their children or like sent them to be apprentices to become knights. I wonder if that happened. And also orphans, did they take them in?
Few truly followed it. In return for land and favour, they pledged loyalty and protection to their lord. But knighthood wasn't just earned through valour, it was bought through wealth. A single suit of armour could cost as much as a small village, and many knights owed more to fortune than to faith. Man-
Then I guess this meant that only the high society could afford to to have knights.
Manuscripts like the Maciejewski Bible show the brutal truth: lances shattering, swords biting through chainmail, blood soaking into.
Yeah, if they trained from childhood, then I guess that would be brutal because this is their only their only goal in life is to fight until the death, and that's terrible.
Mud. To peasants, knights were both guardians and oppressors. To kings, they were the essential tool of rule, loyal when rewarded, dangerous when not. Beneath the ideals of chivalry laid a world built on strength, honour, and the iron will to survive. The high clergy. Bishops and abbots controlled vast lands, collected tithes, and advised kings.
So this answered my question about earlier about the clergies and the church and stuff. So I guess the lower clergy weren't the ones who abused the power. I guess it was these high clergy. Collected lands, controlled lands, collected tithe, advised kings. Yep, they had a lot of power back then.
Their cathedrals rose higher than any castle, symbols of divine power made stone. The church owned a.
And actually, if you think about it, this is still going on because I don't know if you guys ever seen those TikTok videos where the church priests they're they're asking for donations, people are donating to them. I saw one where it was like a guy was sort of like explaining why he bought, I think it was like a super expensive car. I don't know what it was, but anyways, he was saying I bought this car and stuff like that from the money that the people donated to the church. And there was another one where this church priest was telling this girl to sell her house and everything so that to help God.
Staggering share of Europe's land, and with it came wealth and armies. A bishop might ride to battle under the cross. An abbot could command hundreds of men. They sat on royal councils, crowned monarchs, and decided which wars were holy. For peasants, priests offered salvation. For rulers, bishops offered legitimacy. Between heaven and earth, the high clergy held both, and they wielded it like a weapon.
It's kind of hypocritical. They have all this power because people think that they're supposed to be pure, that they represent heaven and stuff. But they're really the ones who are stealing, who are corrupted, really, using their power for bad instead of good.
Great nobles. These were the king's power brokers, dukes, counts, and barons who ruled entire regions like miniature kingdoms. Their castles loomed over valleys and rivers, reminders that land meant control. They collected taxes, held courts, and commanded armies of knights. In theory, they served the king. In reality, many were strong enough to challenge him. France's barons forced their monarchs into charters like Magna Carta, and civil wars often erupted over pride and territory. A single noble's loyalty could decide the fate of a realm. Their word could summon hundreds to war or crush a peasant's revolt overnight. They were both the crown's foundation and its greatest threat, bound by oaths that could be broken with the swing of a sword. At the top of the pyramid stood the king, the source of all land, law, and loyalty. Every manor, every title, every sword ultimately traced back to him. He ruled by divine right, claiming authority from God himself. But power depended on strength and cunning as much as faith. Strong kings like England's Edward I or France's Philip II could bend nobles to their will. Weak ones became their prisoners in all but name. Royal coronation.
You ever seen like those kings who were so manipulated by the council and stuff like that, that eventually their kingdom fell? I always thought that was some sort of mm, sort of funny, you could say, because there are these people who were raised from childbirth to be kings. There were people that had predecessors who were so powerful, who had a lot of things, who would rule, somehow that they fell to that manipulation. And to me, that's just something that you could really wonder about. You know, even when you raise somebody as a certain person since birth, that they could still turn out differently than what you expected.
Blurred politics and religion, the anointing oil making
Or rather, maybe it's because of the way that they were birthed that they could be so easily manipulated.
mortal men seem holy. The king's justice decided disputes, granted land, or took it away. He was the symbol of the entire feudal order, a single man standing atop a chain of oaths, armies, and obligations. When a kingdom fell, it was said that the crown cracked first. That's all for this video. Feel free to
And that makes sense because the kings were the kingdom. Well, this is the first part. Well, anyways, thank you guys for watching. I think this will be the first in a series of videos about this because I do want to be well informed before I play the game so that I could really enjoy and appreciate the things, the details and stuff like that is included into the game. Because I think the sort of things are things that we should praise since so much detail and hard work went into making it historically accurate.